So today we are going to be talking about the costumes in Aladdin, specifically the historical accuracy and style in the 1992 animated film. I'll be rating each of them out of 5, just for a sprinkle of fun. And just a disclaimer, any personal opinions regarding the costumes, I hope you take it with a grain of salt. However, for the historical context, if I do make any mistakes or miss out on anything, please do tell me. And with that said, let's get into the video. The 1992 animated film bases its story on the tale of Aladdin and the Magical Lamp, or Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp, if we are being more accurate. It was one of the popular tales in the famous book of stories, 1001 Nights. As we unpack this, you will soon understand why I almost got whiplash just researching the history of the tale alone. The book 1001 Nights is speculated to have been first referenced in Arabic literature in the 9th century. This comes centuries before the widely known translation by French Orientalist Antoine Galland, who published the French translation in the early 18th century. This brings up the first problem, but it comes to no one's surprise, but Galland, being an Orientalist, poses a problem because in his translation of the book, it had quite, an Orientalist view of the Arab world. The word Orientalism was coined by Edward Said, who wrote it in his book also titled Orientalism. The word derives from the root word of Orient, which to the West signified the Far East, so the Middle East and the rest of Asia. And in his book, Said states how Orientalism is a Western style for dominating, restructuring, and having authority over the Orient. And through Western literature written by Orientalists about the Middle East, we frequently see much of the region's autonomy and voices taken away and instead replaced with the West's own prejudices and stereotypes, othering the Far East and its people from Western Europe's own culture. Authenticity and Discourses in Aladdin 1992, the author states how Antoine Galland's translation marked a cultural transfer through introducing an exotic, colorful, and adventurous, yet unsafe, life-threatening, and mysterious image of the Orient. So much so that scholars question the authenticity of the translation. Now for the second problem. In addition to speculations of the authenticity of the translation, others have argued about the origins of the tale of Aladdin, even dubbing it as an orphan tale. Orphan tale was a term used by Maya Gerhardt, who in her book, The Art of Storytelling, a literary study of the 1001 Nights, stated how the tale of Aladdin differed from the usual folkloric tales in Arabic literature. Another reason why it might be an orphan tale is also because the first Arabic story of Aladdin actually traces back to Galland's own translation of the book, meaning that it is possible that Galland's translation holds the first telling of the Aladdin tale, possibly proving that it is indeed an orphan tale. And having an Orientalist coming up with a tale set in the Middle East is never a good thing. Now the third issue, is the setting of the story. Many have debated that Aladdin could have been set in China instead of Persia. There are even Victorian illustrations depicting the tale of Aladdin set in China or Turkestan in Central Asia. I don't think it is comical how the only story with very little authentic Arabic influence and a lot of Orientalist undertones kind of became the representative story when referring to the book 1001 Nights, or in reference to Arabic literature in general. Hence, with these very confusing timelines and settings of the origins and authenticity of Aladdin, it would be quite boring going through every single possible Aladdin origin. So I will be sticking to the 9th and 18th century Persia when assessing the historical accuracy. Now let's talk about the movie. When Disney's Aladdin came out in 1992, it grossed over 217 million US dollars in the box office and was considered one of Disney's most successful monetarily films at that time. And with it being a massive success, the movie also kind of cemented this idealized view of the Middle East for many Western audiences. Initially, Disney had intended for the 1992 film to be located in Baghdad. However, due to the political climate at that time and fearing black backlash, they decided to locate it in a fictional city called Agrabah. Very innovative. And this decision to set it in the Middle East, but not showing too much of it in fear of backlash, was very confusing, and it kind of shows in the film. I mean, with the very first song of the film being titled Arabian Nights, as well as depicting common stereotypes like having a character ride on a camel in the desert, wearing turbans, comically large turbans, as well as the palace being a clear reference to the Taj Mahal, which is located in Agra, India, and not anywhere else in the Middle East. And just like the Orientalist undertones from Gallen's translation, the Disney adaptation also had its fair share of it. Just like any American film portraying any foreign country, it had themes of American ideals such as freedom. This is very important to note because can you guess what was happening at the time of the movie? Yup, the Gulf War, where the US was being very helpful and spreading the cause of freedom. Definitely not there for the oil fields, for sure though. But with this controversial Gulf War and it perpetuating very harmful stereotypes of the Middle East and Arabs, you had the film kind of constantly reminding its audiences that American ideals were indeed superior, whereas stereotypical depictions of Arab men were barbaric. Finally, we have come to the costumes. In the film, we see the women dressed in mostly two ways, the first being background characters dressed in veils, and the second being Jasmine and the harem girls dressed with clothes exposing their torso and stomach. This image being very similar to the westernized version of a belly dancer costume. And the choice of the clothes on Jasmine being similar to the harem girls perpetuates Orientalist ideas. In The Authenticity and Discourses in Aladdin 1992, it states how the clothes on women characters generate this binary representation of Oriental female figures, and how it categorizes the Orient into a sexualized group with an attractive outfit and a more sexualized veiled group striving to be unveiled. Idiotically, the West likes to perceive this religious garment, the veil, as something sexy waiting to be revealed, thus making veiled women more exotic and unfortunately sexualized. As stated by Erin Edison, the veil is an erotic prop for American fantasy rather than a recognizable system of social order. But back to Princess Jasmine. Her clothes not only represent this sexualized version of an Arab girl, but also this white American girl stereotype, but just in a brown girl's body. From her clothes having early 90s staples such as halter tops and baggy pants down to her attitude and speech, which were deliberately made to resemble a typical American teenager, where unlike most background characters, she speaks with an American accent.
I will win your daughter.
How dare you? All of you, standing around deciding my future? I am not a prize to be won.
It can be assumed that Disney, making Jasmine out to strive for independence and always speak her mind, ties back to the creator's intention of showing a contrast between Western girls and feminism versus Middle Eastern girls and their lack of feminism. Because to the West, American girls are free and independent, whereas girls in the Middle East are meek and submissive, who have absolutely no clue about feminism at all. To put it simply, a quote from Disney's Magic Carpet Ride, Aladdin and Women in Islam, Princess Jasmine is a valley girl in veils. So very clearly, Princess Jasmine's costume is not historically accurate. If it was accurate, this is how it would look like. First, any princess of Persia or an Islamic country would be fully covered with a veil, especially in public. If we are assuming that Aladdin took place in the late 9th century, the fashion we would be looking at would be what the nobility wore during the Abbasid dynasty. It was an empire which ruled Persia from the year 750 to 1258. So lucky for us, we can gauge what 9th century Princess Jasmine would have worn. In general, a noble lady would be wearing a sarwal, kameez, and a dura'ah. I am so sorry for the butchered pronunciation. These are some of the items of clothing that they would have been wearing. The sarwal would have been worn underneath and would not be visible except for maybe at the ankles. Next, we have the kameez, which is like a body shirt or a tunic worn by both men and women. The tunic would also be very loose and not tight-fitted at all. Women of higher status would have their kameez be made of silk instead of linen. Noble women would also be wearing a thwab, which was like a dress/robe, typically made out of silks and brocades. Lastly, women at the time would also wear a dura'ah over the thwab. It resembled a long robe and would have slits at the front with white sleeves. And for accessories, we would see Princess Jasmine wearing a veil, typically made out of gemstones, embroidery, and even sometimes leather. Now, if we are assuming that Aladdin took place in the late 17th century to early 18th century, based on the translation, Princess Jasmine would still be wearing a sarwal underneath a very long sleeved dress tied with a belt. Princess Jasmine would also be unlikely to wear the famous blue outfit, as noble ladies at the time liked to wear red and green colors, as it signified their wealth status due to these colors being difficult to supply. Princess Jasmine will also be seen with a veil over her head when she's anywhere outside of her bedchambers. The historical inaccuracy of Princess Jasmine's clothes, where she's supposed to be modestly dressed but is not in the film, ties back down to the West's prejudice against modesty in Islamic countries, viewing such practice as subjugating these women to be modest without choice. And so, Princess Jasmine stands to be a direct contrast and objection to such oppression in the Middle East by being dressed as an exotic belly dancer when she's supposedly underage. She is underage, she's 16. Yeah.
Beard is so twisted.
Totally not ironic at all. While the forced modesty in Islamic countries is true to a certain extent, for anyone who doesn't know, it has nothing to do with Islam and everything to do with the control of women, which unfortunately is not limited to Islamic countries. I would give Princess Jasmine a generous 2 stars based on historical accuracy, because they did get the sarwal right, even though it's supposed to be underneath layers of clothing. and I guess the veil. And based on style, I would give it a 3.5 because you've got to admit it was one of the more prettier princess outfits out of everyone else. Now let's go on to Aladdin. While Princess Jasmine was made to represent an ideal American teenage girl, Aladdin was similarly made to resemble the all-American hunk. I mean, the animators did use Tom Cruise as a face model for the character.
You got Julia Roberts and Michael J. Fox. They don't fit together. You need Tom Cruise and Julia Roberts. They fit together. You need more Tom Cruise.
Additionally, Aladdin also has an American accent and pearly teeth, in contrast to other male characters such as the villain Jafar, who is characterized with what I presume is a thick Middle Eastern accent, and he also has a darker skin compared to Aladdin. We also see such distinctions between Aladdin and other male characters, with the soldiers who are drawn also much bigger, hairier, and again, more hairy, and again with the thick Arab accent, and also some broken teeth. As for Aladdin's costume, like the character himself, he states himself he's a street rat.
Riff-raff, street rat.
So expecting him to dress historically accurate as an impoverished man would in the 9th and 18th century would honestly not be that difficult, because you probably would just need a top and bottom. However, judging by the clothes worn by Aladdin in the film, I would say he is simultaneously wearing too many yet too little clothes. Aladdin's clothes, I find, closely resembles what a Turkish man would wear rather than a Persian man in any century. In the animated film, we see Aladdin wearing a beige baggy trousers or salwars, a purple vest, and a fez. Right off the bat, no man, even the poor, would be wearing a vest exposing his midriff without a linen shirt underneath. They would also probably be wearing it without the vest because, additional money for the additional cloth. I mean, this creative decision was clearly a fan service to teenage girls to ogle at a heartthrob, and my 8-year-old self would like to say thank you. Secondly, the fez is very inaccurate, as in both timelines, the fez, and a red one at that, was very likely not worn in Persia. We only start to see the fez being worn in 19th century Turkey or the Ottoman Empire during the 19th century. It got popularized by the Ottoman Sultan Mahmud II as a way to both modernize and westernize the Ottoman military uniform.
First, that fez and vest combo is much too 3rd century.
So no genie, Aladdin was actually way ahead of his time. But if Aladdin was to wear a historically accurate headpiece, it would more likely be a turban instead of a fez, because the fez wouldn't have existed during the 9th or 18th century. So based on historical accuracy, I would rate it 1.5 out of 5 because it was very inaccurate. And for the style, I'll give it a pitiful 2. For Aladdin's second costume, he is now dressed as a prince. He wears a turban as well as a white long-sleeved blouse and baggy pants with what I assumed to be a golden shoulder pads with a belt, and also high boots with a cloak. If Aladdin was set in the 9th century, a prince or a nobleman would be wearing a sarwal, kind of what Aladdin is wearing. However, a prince or a wealthy man in the 9th century would most likely be wearing a robe. There are different types of robes worn by people who are richer, and the richest. Some of these robes are, and I apologize for the butchered pronunciation, but some of them are the gabd, faruj, or a dura'a, to name a few. And these robes were long enough to cover up the sarwal, so the sarwal is not supposed to be seen. Similar to women having to wear veils as an outer layer, Men also covered their clothes with a cloak, but unlike the cloak worn like this, it would have been worn like that. For headpieces, the men would have been wearing a turban, and rich men would often have their turbans decorated. So I guess the feather is considered a decoration, so plus points for that. I could not find any picture evidence of noble men during the late 17th and early 18th century. But overall, I would rate the historical accuracy of Aladdin's prince clothes 2.5 out of 5, and style-wise a 2. I mean, it's white. It's boring. So that's the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and do let me know your opinions if you have any, and thank you.